I realized something recently that I did not emotionally prepare for. The world I grew up in is now an aesthetic. And I mean that. It's not history, it's not really nostalgia, it's an aesthetic for people that didn't live it. Soft filter TikToks, people romanticizing flip phones like they were medieval artifacts. I mentioned this to a friend who's got a decade and a half from me, and he said, "First time, bro?" Which is wild to hear when you still feel 22 in your head. Because it's not about age, it's about realizing you stopped being current and you started being reference material. And that's when it hit. You're not old, you're context. And this video is about the books that did that to us, before anyone was calling it a vibe. My name is Dove James and this is the Bald Book Geek. Remember to like, subscribe, tell me what you think in the comments below, and if you want to support this channel and keep these lights on, remember that YouTube memberships, Patreon, Substack, as well as Ko-fi are available. Let's get into it. So according to the internet, we're dinosaurs now. Not like cool dinosaurs, not a T-Rex. We're more museum plaque energy. You can feel it sometimes when you're online talking about books, and you mention a writer and someone's like, "I've never heard of them, are they new?" No, they're dead. Very dead. Sometimes aggressively dead. And the reaction is the kind of thing I want to talk about here. Because it's not really about age, it's not even about getting older. It's about realizing that the world you grew up in is no longer seen as lived experience. It's seen as a reference, a vibe, an aesthetic. Something to be repackaged, filtered, reinterpreted by people who didn't actually live through it. And that's a weird moment to hit. Because you, me, haven't just aged, we've become context. And once that happens, people stop asking what your world felt like and they just start borrowing pieces of it. And I'm gonna say this video is not about pretending things were better back then. Just gonna put that one out there. It's about the books that shape the millennial experience and why understanding them still matters even if you never end up liking them. Here's the thing people forget about millennials. We didn't grow up online the way people do now, we grew up transitioning into the internet. We remember life before constant connection, and then we watched it arrive. We had physical libraries, dog-eared paperbacks, school reading lists that somehow expected emotional maturity we absolutely did not have. And whatever strange, slightly inappropriate book your oldest sibling had lying around the house. We didn't just read books, we inherited them. From teachers, from parents, from shelves that hadn't been updated in years. And a lot of the writers that spoke to us weren't writing for millennials at all. They were writing decades earlier, boomers, the lost generation, beatniks, counterculture weirdos, alcoholics, depressed geniuses, and people who absolutely needed therapy but got a typewriter instead because it was cheaper. And somehow, those voices hit us. They spoke to us. So first, let's start with the obvious ghosts, the dead guys we love. F. Scott Fitzgerald, the man who wrote about wealth, emptiness, self-destruction, the failure of the American dream, or maybe even just the dream now. A millennials read Great Gatsby like, "Oh, this feels uncomfortably current." Not because we were rich, but because we were promised something shiny, and then handed debt and instability instead. Then you have Ernest Hemingway, brutal, minimalist, emotionally... Well, there are many words that I can't say to describe his work in the best way possible on YouTube. Writing about people who can't talk about their feelings but absolutely bleed quietly in a field rather than ask for help. Not relatable in a healthy way, but very relatable in, wow, repression really does ruin people way. And then there's Jack Kerouac and the Beat Generation. Restlessness, movement, drifting, running from meaning while desperately searching for it. That entire worldview fed directly into millennial anxiety. We were raised being told, you can do anything, your dreams will come true, and we watched the economy collapse. Twice. Those writers gave us language for disillusionment before we even knew what it was. Now, then there's the books that felt dangerous. They felt illegal, illicit. Books you were too young to read, ones you maybe didn't fully understand but felt anyway. Chuck Palahniuk. Fight Club didn't just exist as a movie, it existed as a mindset. Alienation. The idea that masculinity is defined by certain ways, who you should be, what you should buy, and where you should be at this point in your life. You didn't read Palahniuk because he was comfortable, you read him because it felt like someone was finally naming the anger you weren't allowed to talk about. Then there's Bret Easton Ellis. Yes, I know. Dogmatic words like controversial, problematic, difficult, all those stupid words. But Less Than Zero and American Psycho weren't just shock extravaganzas. They were about emptiness, surface level living, the horror of being emotionally hollow in a world obsessed with image and success. You didn't read Ellis to feel good, you read him to feel seen, or disturbed enough to ask why you weren't feeling anything at all. And for a generation that were quietly terrified of becoming nothing, that mattered. And then it wasn't all doom and nihilism. But I can feel that. I can feel you typing right now. We also had writers who felt like they were living alongside us. Nick Hornby, pop culture as identity, messy relationship, men who were deeply annoying but in a painfully self-aware way. Books about nostalgia, taste, emotional immaturity, not as jokes but as flaws to be wrestled with. That's millennial DNA. And yes, John Green, because for a lot of people, hi, former nerd fighter here, John Green was the first writer who said your feelings matter, and it's okay to be messy and imperfect, because we are messy and imperfect. He made sincerity acceptable at a time when irony was armor. That balance, that earnestness, without pretending pain is aesthetic, shaped a generation of readers. Here's where my frustration comes in. There's this attitude online now, again, not everyone, I want to clarify, where people refuse to look sideways or backwards. If a book isn't trending, viral, or algorithmically approved, it might as well not exist. And that's wild to me, because so many of the books shaping current writers are echoes of voices that came before. You can't understand modern literature, modern books, the present or the future, without understanding where the nihilism came from, where the counterculture started, why certain tropes are tied now, why certain voices still cause discomfort. Books don't appear in a vacuum. They are conversations across decades. Millennials didn't invent their tastes at all. We didn't invent our taste. We didn't just go, this is our aesthetic now, we absorbed it. These books, and there's a whole list of them, hundreds, if not, hundreds of writers and books that shaped us at that time. So if you're younger and you're watching this, here's what I want you to hear. You don't have to like these books. You don't have to finish them. You don't have to defend them, and you don't have to make them your whole personality. But reading backwards gives you context. It teaches you that why certain stories feel familiar, why themes keep returning, and why some books hit. Because they name something human that hasn't changed. And honestly, you might be surprised how much of what you love now is shaped by a bunch of wonderfully flawed individuals who were writing long before you were even born, and in some cases before your parents were even born. So yeah, we're not dinosaurs. We're more like the literary fossils with opinions. We didn't just read books, we lived through that shift between old publishing and new media, between gatekeepers and chaos, between physical shelves and endless feeds. And the books that shaped us, they're still worth talking about. Not because they were perfect, but because they're part of a conversation you're already in, and if nothing else, maybe go hunt a library down sometimes. The ghosts have a lot to say.